Coronavirus Economic Response Package Omnibus Bill 2020. Guarantee of lending to small and medium enterprises. Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. Australian Business Growth Fund Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. Assistance for severely affected regions. Special Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. Structured Finance Support Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill number 1, 2019-2020. Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill number 2, 2019-2020. Boosting Cash Flow for Employers Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020.
Now, pursuant to the order agreed to earlier in the day, the committee stage will be chaired from this chair rather than from the clerk's table. I'm just waiting for Deputy Chair to come and take the chair because I'm not allowed to chair this particular session of debate. Senator Faruqi, if you could come up while someone else makes their way to the chamber, because we're about to move to the roster moment, so someone will be on their way. We can move into the committee stage of debate. Very much appreciated.
So the committee is considering the Coronavirus Economic Response Package Omnibus Bill 2020 and 7 related bills. Is it the wish of the committee that the bills be taken together and as a whole? There being no objection, it is so ordered. As a number of requests for amendments have been circulated, I advise that senators proposing requests must circulate a statement of reasons for framing them as requests, together with a statement by the clerk on whether the amendments would be regarded as requests under the precedents of the Senate. Is it the wish of the committee that the statements accompanying the circulated requests be incorporated in Hansard immediately after the requests to which they relate? There being no objection, it is so ordered. The question is that the bill be agreed to without amendments or requests. Senator Seward.
Thank you. I'm wondering, we have a series of questions which I would like to ask at a fairly quickly. I don't intend to hold up the chamber, but I'm wondering if we could address those and then deal with the amendments. Would that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Can I first ask, will the government be? I presume the government's going to be circulating some amendments. Okay. Thank you. Ask when?
Yes, we will, and that should be imminent in the next few minutes. I might just say, I mean, I explained, I guess, in my summing up speech what the amendments would do. I'm happy to go through that again, but I guess the key is that the amendments will provide an expanded regulation-making power to the Minister to address the issues that we indicated we would address, and specifically we are in a position to flag very clearly that the Minister intends to use this power imminently to make student payments, up study, Austudy and youth allowance student, and to make changes to the partner income test, and essentially to make sure that they are captured by the coronavirus supplement arrangements. There are some other things that these amendments will enable us to do. Essentially, it will increase the flexibility for us to deal with a whole range of things, from payment rates to means testing arrangements, eligibility criteria, waiting periods and residency requirements, to respond to things in a flexible, measured and timely manner. But the amendments themselves don't make the change. It gives us the power to make the change.
Senator Seward.
For that, and the Minister for that response. Can I ask, there's some specific issues in terms of both the existing provisions in the bill, but that one, the new ones that you're going to circulate through the amendment. Does that mean that payments can be, at the moment the supplement is $5.50, and I understand that the Minister has the capacity to vary that after 6 months, that's already there. Can the rate of that supplement payment be varied before the 6 months is up?
Minister.
Yes, it could be, which is consistent with one of our principles as we are approaching this, to make these things scalable. Yeah.
Senator Siewert.
Thank you. So if the government was of a mind to say, for example, at least bring the disability support pension up to the same rate that job seekers will now receive, could that be done?
Minister.
That could be done, but I've got to say here, though, that that is not our intention as I stand here today. And the reason being that, like, we are focused on targeting the income support very specifically on those who've been impacted by significant change in circumstance. And we can have an argument about the level of income support across different income categories. But one cannot argue that there has been a sort of dramatic change in circumstance in terms of the level of income before and after the coronavirus hit in relation to, for example, disability support pensioners. But what we have, of course, done is made a decision for a second $750 payment that goes to all those that are not eligible for the coronavirus supplement.
Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Minister. I've had contact from, and I'm sure many of my colleagues across the chamber have had contacts with disabled people that are on DSP who believe and very strongly argue that they will have additional costs because of their disability. So I'll put that on the record, and we'll be coming back to the government about that. But I specifically ask about those that are working on the disability support pension and lose their jobs. Sorry, I know that sorry, I'm not trying to have a go. I know you've got things you've got to organise. I'm asking specifically about people that are on DSP and who have been working, and I gave an example in my second reading contribution where somebody is in the circumstances where they're continuing to work when they probably shouldn't be, because they're worried about the economic impact of quitting being able to have to stop work. Now, they're not going to be available for this supplement. So they're a supporting parent, or they're a parent, and they're on DSP. If they lose their job or quit their job or have to give up their job because of the health threat, because they've got disabilities, will they be able to? How can they make up that additional money that they're losing?
Minister.
Anyone who is on a DSP will get access to the two $750 payments. At this stage, there is no other plan.
Senator Siewert.
Thank you for making that clear. We'll obviously continue to advocate on this particular issue. Can I ask, will new income support recipients living in cashless debit card trial areas be put on the cashless debit card?
Senator Ruston, wait for the call. Senator Ruston.
Oh, sorry. Just getting it started. Yes, Senator Siewert.
Senator Siewert.
So has the government got an estimate of the number of people, or have they done any estimates of the number of people that will now lose their jobs, go into job seeker payment, that will be going on to the cashless debit card?
Minister Ruston.
No, I don't have that figure before me, Senator Siewert.
Senator Siewert.
Could I ask that that be taken on notice, please? In addition, has there been any consideration given to, and can the government tell us how much longer people will have to wait to get access to job seeker payment if they're having to go on the Indue card?
Just a moment, Minister. The Minister took on notice your last question. I'm not sure if Hansard got the yes. Minister Ruston.
Senator Siewert, I might seek further clarification on the question you've just asked me. I'm not sure I understand what you're requesting.
Senator Siewert.
So there is extra administration for someone to go on the cashless debit card. They have to get the Indue card. They've got 80%. For people to be clear, 80% of someone's job seeker allowance is now going to be quarantined if you lose your job in a CDC trial area. I'm asking, what further time will it be before someone actually gets access to the to the payment because they have to get processed through the CDC process and the INJU process.
Minister Ruston.
Thank you, Senator Seward. I now understand what you're asking. We have applied an absolute maximum amount of resources across the entire social security system so that we can supercharge the speed with which we are able to process payments across the entire range of either changes or existing payments that have been increased so that people are able to get access to this money as quickly as possible. In terms of giving you an exact time, I'll have to take that on notice.
Senator Seward.
Thank you, Minister. You have given a commitment to, in some instances, in 5 days. I find it hard to believe that you can get your income support payment, your job seeker payment and your INJU card in that length of time. So could you also take on notice, please, what length of time that you calculate it will take, please?
Minister Ruston. I'm in the hands of the Senate. Senator Faruqi.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Deputy President. As I said in my speech earlier, my office has really been inundated by messages from students, many of whom are already below the poverty line, and they are really concerned about not being included in the coronavirus supplement. Last night, the Prime Minister said that they were included. Youth allowance was included in the coronavirus supplement. I can't find it there at the moment. I know my colleagues here and in the other place have been asking questions today about this, but haven't got clarity on this. So could you clarify if students on youth allowance, AB study and Oz study are included in the coronavirus supplement?
Minister Cormann.
Thank you very much. I have addressed that on a number of occasions now. So firstly, the Prime Minister was right. I mean, youth allowance other, as it is called, has been part from the outset in the coronavirus supplement payment arrangements. But as we've indicated, I mean, the government has decided to move an amendment, which I might move now, given I'm on my feet. Government Amendment ZI51 on sheet ZI510, and what that amendment does is it gives the Minister for Families and Social Services the power, the regulation-making power, to alter settings associated with payment rates, means testing arrangements, eligibility criteria, waiting periods and residency requirements to respond to the evolving situation in a scalable, measured and timely manner. And what the government has made very clear and what the ministers made clear is that we intend to use this power immediately on passage of this legislation and after royal assent has been received to make student payments, UP study, Oz study and youth allowance student eligible for the coronavirus supplement on the same basis as the other job seeker payments. Sorry, I thought I'd made that clear before.
I'll just advise senators before I call you Senator Seward, I believe that is about to be circulated, those amendments? No. So it's moved, but it hasn't yet been circulated. So Senator Seward, I think you were seeking the call?
That's the point I was just going to make, is that we haven't seen it yet, so it's hard to debate it. But I understand Senator Faruqi has some other questions.
Senator Faruqi.
Some other questions apart from this amendment, is that all right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, it's
okay.
Committee of the Whole. Ask away.
Absolutely. So I don't know if the Minister is going to answer them or someone else. I do have some questions about permanent employees who are stood down. So the government's fact sheet, income support for individuals, states that expanded access to income support will include access for permanent employees who are stood down. Minister, what are the criteria for workers who are stood down to be able to access the job seeker payment?
Minister Ruston.
Thank you very much, Senator Faruqi. Subject to the passage of these particular suite of bills, the access criteria will be largely dependent on the income test, and so that if the individual meets the income test and can demonstrate that they have had a loss of income that takes them below that threshold, then they will be eligible for the payment. We will be waiving a number of things that will expand the eligibility, including the 1 week waiting period, the liquid asset waiting period, which related to the $5,500 cash limit, and also the assets test, and that's particularly focused at sole traders and small businesses, so that they are able to retain the assets of their business in the hope that once they get through this crisis, they'll be able to return to their businesses.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, do workers who are stood down have to use up all of their leave entitlements before being eligible, including annual leave and long service leave?
Minister Ruston.
Yeah. We would be expecting people who have got access to leave entitlements to use those leave entitlements, or sick leave or annual leave entitlements, before they seek for the taxpayer to support them at this time.
Senator Faruqi.
Highlighted some, sorry. Chair.
I've called you. Senator
Thank
Faruqi.
you. You highlighted the eligibility criteria earlier for workers who are stood down. Will these be provided through regulation?
Yeah.
Minister Ruston.
Okay. I've been advised that I will be making an instrument, so they are subordinate regulation.
Senator Faruqi, please wait for the call. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Chair. Has that instrument been drafted yet?
Minister Ruston.
It's currently being drafted, Senator Faruqi.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you. Minister, will the meaning of stood down under the regulations have the same meaning as usually applies under workplace law?
Minister Ruston.
Look, Senator Faruqi, I'm happy to take some legal advice in relation to the specific legal meaning of what you're referring to. But what I would say is the purpose of these regulations is to make sure that anybody who was in employment, who has lost their employment or had a substantial diminution in the money that they are earning, will be able to get access to welfare support payments, including the coronavirus supplement, so that they are able to make ends meet between now and when this crisis is over, in the hope that they will be able to go return to their existing employment. So, apart from, as I mentioned earlier, the assets test, the income test that will still apply, there are really very few other requirements that we will be expecting the employee who's lost their job to meet in order for them to be eligible to receive payment over the next 6-month period.
Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, just one last question. When will the regulations be public? When do you expect that they'll be finalised and public?
Minister Ruston.
Obviously, Senator Faruqi, imminently, because we need to make sure that these regulations come into effect as soon as possible, so that we can allow or give access to people who find themselves in this difficult position, access to payment as soon as possible.
Thank you. It's my intention to move the motion as moved by Senator Cormann. So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Cormann. Are you seeking the call, Senator Keneally?
Yes, thank
Senator
you. Question
Keneally.
to the Minister. Minister, the amendment that has been circulated in your name, will it have a sunset provision included into the amendment?
Minister Cormann.
Thank you very much. The sunset of the arrangement will be in the regulation.
Senator Keneally.
Senator Cormann, Minister Cormann, I flagged that the opposition would prefer, in fact, request that the sunset provision be made in the legislation. Are you prepared to accept an amendment that would seek to do that?
Minister
Our
Cormann.
policy intent is very clear. We're obviously now drafting this, reasonably quickly. I'm happy to take this back for a moment and to address that and have a proper sunset in it.
Senator Keneally.
On that last point, on that, Minister Cormann, I believe in your speech you indicated the end of 2020. I flagged that we would be supportive of that. if it can be included in the legislation.
I'm in the hands of the Senate if anyone wishes to move other amendments. Yes, it's my intention to postpone the amendment as moved by Senator Cormann until we get the amendments as spoken about in the Senate. Senator Siewert.
Thank you. Can I ask, is the government still processing Centrelink debts, including robo-debts?
Minister Ruston.
Senator, I'm going to take that on notice to give you an exact answer, but what I can tell you that over the last few days, every resource that has been available within the Centrelink and all external resources that we have been able to access have been moved into the processing of new payments that are coming online. So whilst I'm not going to absolutely say no, I think the answer is no, but I will confirm that for you, because over the coming months, our only focus is going to be making sure that we apply every resource that is at our disposal to make sure we process new applications as quickly as we possibly can.
Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Minister. I asked because as of Friday, somebody had been getting a phone call about when they're going to start repaying their debts. So hence my question. Can you...
Yes, Minister Ruston.
Senator Siewert, to you and everybody else in the chamber and anybody listening, if people are finding that they are getting a situation as you've just outlined, can you please bring it to our attention, because that certainly is not our intention for our application of resources over the coming weeks.
Senator Siewert. Oh.
Thank you. Can I just finish this bit? And
yes,
then
sure.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification, Minister. I certainly will be taking you up on that if I hear of any more. Can I ask then, in terms then of the reviewing the robo-debts for income averaging, is that ongoing or has that been suspended as well?
Minister Ruston.
Once again, Senator, I'm going to take that on notice, because I'm actually not sure. There have been so many changes because of the rapid escalation of the needs of the virus for other purposes that I couldn't actually answer that question, but I'll certainly take it on notice.
Senator Keneally.
Thank you. While we are waiting for the amendment to come back, I might take this opportunity just to clarify to the Minister for Social Services, Family and Social Services. Thank you, Minister Rushton. The provisions that are moved in this amendment would permit you, through legislative instrument, to apply or vary the rules around temporary visa holders and their access to income support. Is that correct?
Minister Ruston.
Yes, I could do that, but I already have the power to do that as it is for temporary visa holders, as it relates to the special benefits, as opposed to there is with the changes that are enabled by the amendment would actually allow changes for temporary visa holders outside of the scope of the existing measures that are contained in the special benefit.
Senator Keneally.
Just to clarify then, and I thank you, the Minister, for that answer, because the special benefit, as I understand it, applies to people who with a residency requirement of 2 or 4 years. So what this amendment would do would allow people who have not been here for that period of time to perhaps, if you make a regulation, to be able to access income support. Is that one of the ways this is varied?
Senator Ruston.
In the primary legislation, the capacity exists to enable a variation of, or sort of waiving or a suspension of the new arrival waiting period for those people that are residents and are on their pathway to become Australian citizens but are currently undertaking their waiting period, for that to be suspended so that they're able to get the access to the job seeker payment and everything that goes with it in the same way as any other job seeker. So that exists in the primary legislation. This regulation will enable those for changes to be made outside of that. So that actually is contained in the primary legislation already.
Senator Keneally.
Thank you, and maybe I wasn't clear. So For people who are not currently eligible at all for special benefits, they could potentially be eligible under the changes that you're moving tonight. That's what I should have said more clearly.
Senator Siewert, I'm in the hands of the Senate. Senator Siewert.
Can I just clarify another use of that particular provision, and that is to vary Commonwealth rent assistance?
Minister Ruston.
Yes, I could.
So does someone want to move a motion? Senator McKim.
Thank you, Deputy President. I don't want to
I beg your pardon, move an amendment.
Move an amendment, but I do want to just follow up with probably Minister Cormann the matter that Senator Keneally was just asking about, which is the large number of people in Australia who are on temporary visas. It's about 1.6 million people, as I understand it. Could you first confirm, Minister, that there is the capacity under the amendments that you've just tabled for support to be provided to people who are in Australia and on temporary protection visas and for various reasons are not able to leave the country, or who actually live in the country but do not have access to income supports? So firstly, does that capacity exist under this amendment? And secondly, is it the government's intent to provide those people, many of whom are people seeking asylum, many of whom are New Zealanders living in Australia, many of whom are new permanent residents, and various other holiday visa holders, working holiday visa holders? Is it the government's intent, its policy intent, to provide a level of income support for those people?
Minister Cormann.
Thank you very much. As I indicated in the chamber earlier today, our income support system is residency based. The government is indeed introducing a coronavirus supplement of $550 per fortnight, where the eligibility is driven by a residency in Australia requirement. Access to job seeker payment and youth allowance other is available to people residing in Australia who are Australian citizens and permanent residency. Assuming all other eligibility is met, it will not be available to people in Australia on temporary visas, other than some people in limited circumstances on special category visas. Australia's social security system is a non-contributory, residence-based system. It is designed to support primarily Australian citizens and permanent residents. In order to enhance access to these payments for permanent residents, we are temporarily waiving the newly arrived residents' waiting period in order to assist permanent residents get access to job seeker payments. Generally, residency requirements still apply, and most temporary visa holders do not qualify for job seeker payments and other forms of income support. In relation to temporary visa holders, special benefit is available to specified temporary visa holders. The classes of temporary visa holders eligible for special benefit are specified in a legislative instrument and currently include temporary partner visas, temporary humanitarian visas, and bridging visas for victims of human trafficking. The Minister for Families and Social Services has the ability to declare new visa types to be eligible for special benefit, so that's not the function of this amendment. That is a power that the Minister already has. Visa types such as temporary resident, other employment, and temporary resident skilled employment will be included by the Minister in the near future. A special benefit is paid at the same rate as job seeker payment, previously New Start allowance for those aged 22 years and older, or youth allowance for those aged under 22 years. To qualify for special benefit, people must be in financial hardship and unable to earn a sufficient livelihood for themselves and any dependents. So claimants must meet a hardship test based on their liquid assets. Those who are expected to only need payment for less than 13 weeks must have liquid assets of less than 2 weeks' worth of payment. $565.70 for a single person with no children aged 22 years or older. To access special benefit, in addition to meeting the hardship test, they must have experienced a substantial change in circumstances. Special benefit has a stronger income test than other payments. Any income or in-kind support, e.g. Free accommodation, is deducted dollar for dollar. Other payments have a tapered income test. The short answer is that we are not proposing to extend those arrangements to visa holders beyond newly arrived residents with permanent residency still serving their newly arrived residence waiting period, and those who are temporary resident, other employment, and temporary resident skilled employment visa holders. I mean, they are the ones that will be covered by this supplement beyond job seeker recipients, job seeker payment recipients, youth allowance job seeker payment recipients, parenting payment recipients, partnered and single farm household allowance special benefit recipients.
Senator McKim.
Thank you, Deputy President. I do thank the Minister for that clarification. Minister, the simple fact remains that your government cut many thousands of people seeking asylum off the Status Resolution Support Service program, which left them with no income support at all from government. What I'm hearing from you this evening is that you have no intention of providing income support for those people. They're losing their jobs too, Minister. What are they supposed to do? They're going to lose their homes? Do you expect them to be thrown out on the street? It is beyond belief, having cut them off the SSRS a few years ago and effectively forced them into work, whatever they could get. Are they now to be left with no income at all and face homelessness and destitution, as well as their families and their children? It's cruel and callous, and quite frankly beggars belief.
Okay, I'm in the hands of the Senate. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity while we're still asking questions to put on the record and to ask a question of the Minister. My Tasmanian colleague and the Greens Federal Small Business Portfolio holder, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, is obviously not here this evening. We already explained, of course, that a number of our senators were not able to come to participate in this extraordinary session. But he and his team have been working around the clock to make sure that they are listening to the needs and desires of small businesses, including many micro businesses like sole traders. Sole traders include, of course, many farmers, stay-at-home entrepreneurs, whether they be in the kind of arts and creative space or indeed in various different health fields, and tourism operators and musicians. And much like in my home state in South Australia, these people are really the backbone of the small business community in our smaller states and smaller economies. I just want to ask the Minister, exactly what are you going to do to make sure that these people have everything they need to not have to fold their business? Because as you would know, that in many of these small towns, being already on such a tight margin is hard enough. And if these businesses fold, the cascading effect throughout regional areas and towns is going to be huge. And the question to the Minister is, why won't you do what Boris Johnson is doing, making sure there is a proper jobs and wages guarantee that underpins people's salaries, allows these small and micro businesses to keep people employed and employed in a way that that money is still flowing through those local communities. I know that Senator Whish-Wilson, if he was here tonight, would be asking some very direct questions to you, and I just hope that we can have some short answers this evening.
Minister Ruston.
Thank you very much. So, Senator Hanson-Young, on Sunday there was an extensive package that we are legislating for today. Well, I'll take your interjection because sole traders were helped in that package significantly. In fact, they were helped on both sides of the package. One part of the package was focused on those people that see either they've lost their jobs or they've had substantial reduction in their income, and that's where we have given sole traders access to JobSeeker without the mutual obligations that would normally require them to actually give up their businesses. So the sole trader has immediately got access to welfare payments, including the Corona supplement, and at the same time they can continue working in their in their sole trading or their small business, and that will be considered as part of their mutual obligation, because we want those people to stay in their businesses. We want them to stay there, and we want those businesses to continue to be in place when we get to the other side of the coronavirus crisis. On the other side, on making sure that businesses can continue to be in business and can continue to employ people, Senator Cash put a raft of small business initiatives in place for small and medium-sized businesses with a turnover of under $50 million. They included a range of things, including grants of up to $100,000 for businesses based on payroll, and with a minimum amount of $20,000 available to a business, and this is payable on their payroll, and they pay as they go returns for April if we are talking about businesses that make their returns quarterly. In addition, there is also a range of different regulatory relief that is available to these small businesses. There are a number of broader initiatives that have been contained in the package. So, Senator Hanson-Young, it may be useful to suggest to your colleague, Mr. Senator Whish-Wilson, that there is a lot of information that's contained on the government website about the specific details of benefits that are being made available to small businesses, sole traders, as well as to employees to get them through this particular period.
Senator Keneally.
Thank you. If I could pick up off the back of Senator McKim's questions, and let's see if we can try it this way. When it comes to various groups of temporary visa holders, can the Minister advise if the following groups will be eligible for the coronavirus supplement or the job seeker payment or the special benefit or something else? So let me try it this way. Working holiday makers and seasonal worker program and the Pacific Labour Scheme. Those temporary visa holders, will they be eligible for Corona supplement, job seeker payments, special benefit, or something else? And if it's something else, do you have something else in mind?
Minister Ruston.
Senator Keneally, the provisions that are in the regulation that are before us provide broad powers so that we can monitor the situation as it moves forward. As we sit here today, the visa categories, I think most of the visa categories that you have outlined are not priority visa categories for us to be providing welfare safety net for. However, in the technical sense, the regulation that is before you provides the power to do so if circumstances change in the future.
Senator Keneally.
Noting that after the 30th of March, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for temporary visa holders to leave the country. They will be, many of them, without income because their jobs in hospitality and in other areas will be lost. They will be forced to either seek work or keep seeking work. They will lack the capacity to self-isolate if they are directed, unless that they can access some form of support. So I, one, encourage the government to consider what steps it's going to take after the 30th of March for those people who essentially will be trapped in Australian borders, unable to leave the country. My other question, similar to the one I have just asked, can the Minister advise if temporary protection visa holders and Safe Haven Enterprise visa holders will be eligible for the coronavirus supplement, the job seeker payment, special benefit, or some other kind of support?
Minister Ruston.
Thank you very much, Senator Keneally. Well, the answer is exactly the same as the answer to the previous question. The capacity exists because we're seeking to build flexibility into going forward so that we can continue to monitor the situation. I am not making any announcements tonight about what is in and what's out in relation to temporary visa holders, but we have given you the advice of what the changes that we're intending to make immediately. Senator Cormann outlined that when he spoke to his amendment in the first place. But I reiterate, the capacity exists by this regulation that we are able to be quick and flexible in making changes if the situation changes such that we should choose to do so.
Senator Keneally.
I thank the Minister for that answer. It does provide some clarity. I would like to encourage the government to remember that the status resolution support payment that is available to temporary protection visa holders and Safe Haven Enterprise visa holders was cut by the government. Many people were cut off that payment. When I say it was cut, many people were cut off that payment and told to go out and work. It was already a precarious situation for those people to get jobs because they had a temporary visa and were living in precarious circumstances. It is now even more difficult for them to hold on to employment or to maintain employment. I am aware that from asylum seeker services in both New South Wales and Victoria, these people, many of them are living in below the poverty line, noting that the SRSS payment was below New Start levels. It was below $40 a day. So these were already people living on the extreme margins of poverty, many of them forced already into homelessness, and to live off the charity, really, of non-government organisations. So I encourage the government to use the power that I anticipate the Senate is about to provide to them to consider how it can best support from a public health perspective, because it is in the interest of all Australians that people living in the country, citizen or not, are able to access health testing, coronavirus testing, and income support so they can self-isolate or continue to live at home, as we are directing them to do, if they are unable to work. So I encourage the government to remember that it is in the interest of all Australians, because a virus does not discriminate. It does not check your visa status before it infects you. So if people are trapped here in this country, after the 30th of March in particular, it is in the interest of every single one of us in the country that every single one of us, citizen or not, has access to healthcare and income support if we are required to self-isolate.
I just advise the Senate, we're just waiting for Senator Cormann's amendment. They haven't moved them, so once, sure, I'm just advising senators that when we get that one circulated, we'll go back to that. But you've got the call now, Senator McKim.
Look, thank you, Deputy President. I'll shortly move the amendment in my name, but I just want to tie up, excuse me, on the matter that Senator Keneally and I have been exploring. I find it extraordinary that this appears to be the first that this has come to the government's attention. Has Home Affairs not been involved in the drafting of the government's response to coronavirus? I mean, seriously, there are people here who will be destitute, who will be unable to self-isolate because your government cut them off the SSRS, completely cut them off, basically threw them out on the streets at the mercy of the whims of fate, to rely on organisations in the non-government sector and in the charitable sector for their very survival. I urge the government to come to grips with a looming humanitarian and health disaster. I want to be very clear. That is what we are facing here, and I urge Minister Rushton and Minister Cormann and Minister Dutton, if he's at work or whoever's doing his job at the moment, to come to grips with this issue. While we're on visas, I also want to bring to the government's attention the fact that we, at any time in Australia, have a significant number of temporary visa holders, some of whom are in the categories that Senator Keneally and I have been raising in the debate in the last half an hour, whose visas will soon expire. There needs to be a mechanism that provides for the extension of the expiry dates of visas held by people who are on temporary protection visas that would expire during the period of the coronavirus crisis. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is actually Government 101. And I'm appalled and disappointed that these matters have not been addressed by government and apparently are yet to even be considered by government. So there's the two issues. One is income support for people who are on temporary protection visas, and two, for a number of people whose temporary protection visas will expire during the coronavirus crisis and who, through no fault of their own, won't be able to leave the country, need to have their visas extended. Otherwise, you know what's going to happen. You're going to chuck them all into immigration detention, which you so much love for people who have overstayed visas in this country. And by the way, while you're at it, you can free low-risk people who've spent more than 1 week in immigration detention, because if the coronavirus gets into immigration detention centres, and there's already been at least one Home Affairs guard who has tested positive, or sorry, I should say one guard of an immigration detention facility onshore in Australia that has tested positive to COVID-19. If that virus gets into those places, it will spread like wildfire, people will die, and their blood will be on your hands. My colleagues and I have spoken in our second reading. I'm sorry, Deputy President, if I could just ask for guidance. Did you wish to go to Senator Cormann's amendment now?
No,
or should
it still
I
hasn't
move?
been circulated. I just was giving you some. We'll do yours.
Yeah. So I'll move the amendment standing in my name on sheet 8916 revised, which provides that the legislative rules must require that the terms of any loan agreement to a guarantee granted to a financial institution under subsection 1 include a requirement that an SME, a small or medium enterprise entity to which a loan is made, not make any employee of the SME redundant for the duration of any guarantee granted to the financial institution under that subsection. And just to be clear here, this goes to the point that the Australian Greens have consistently been making today, whether it relates to big corporates, whether it relates to SMEs. The government should be getting some quid pro quo here, while rather than just handing over cash willy-nilly with no guarantees in regards to employment. I mean, we saw Qantas were given a significant share of the $715 million that was given to airlines, and within days they had sacked 20,000 people. 20,000 people. What we keep doing is privatising the obscene profits and then socialising the significant losses, and we need to make sure that that doesn't continue.
Thank you, Senator McKim. Senator Gallagher.
Yeah.
I'll go to the Minister. Okay. Minister Cormann.
Thank you very much. The government will not be supporting this amendment. This amendment will make recipients of all healthcare cards eligible for the 2 economic support payments. Low-income healthcare cards are not traditionally eligible for one-off payments, and government has maintained this approach in this instance in order to facilitate timely delivery of the supplement
Oh, Senator Cormann, we're dealing with
8916, I was told.
8916 revised.
So as I
Mr.
was
Cormann.
saying, we're not supporting this amendment. In order to facilitate timely delivery of the supplement, the economic support payments are targeted towards those on primary income support payments, DVA, payment recipients and holders of healthcare cards who have received one-off payments in the past.
Senator Gallagher.
I think this is the amendment around linking retention of employees with business assistance. Labor won't be supporting this amendment. We have consistently raised concerns about the design of some measures in the stimulus package, such as the cash flow boost not being linked specifically with the retention of employees, and we've made it very clear that we have concerns around that. While we appreciate the intent of this amendment, there could be unintended effects. We already know that small business are reluctant to take on more debt, particularly in uncertain times, and we saw that with loans offered in response to the bushfires. This proposed requirement, whilst also being hard to enforce, could heighten the reluctance of struggling businesses to take on more debt, choose to end the business completely or retrench any remaining staff completely, which would be an even more diabolical situation.
Minister Cormann.
Sorry, the purpose of this guarantee, so we're opposing this. The purpose of this guarantee is to help business survive. We need to have flexibility in any approach to ensure that we're not ruling companies out as a result of a legislative criteria. By being prescriptive, we might actually make it harder for companies that should get access to the money, and they might miss out. The banks will have skin in the game by sharing the risk, and as they assess the loans, they will be looking to support companies to be able to get through the impact of the virus. Given how fast the circumstances are changing, we need to ensure there is flexibility in the legislative instrument that may need to be amended to deal with those circumstances. Ultimately, every business will need to be looked at on an individual basis, and that is why we're getting the banks and non-bank lenders to decide on this, as they know their customers better than the government.
So the question is that the amendment is moved by Senator Kim. Number 1 on sheet 8916 revised be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against? No. I believe the noes have it. Senator McKim.
The ayes have it, Deputy President, but rather in lieu of a division, if I could just ask that the position of the Australian Greens be recorded in the Hansard.
Yes, I think that's possible, that we record your objection. I'll now intend to... Yes, record your support for this amendment, despite it being rejected. Minister.
Thank you very much. I seek leave to replace the amendment that I've previously moved with the revised sheet ZA510 that's been circulated in the chamber. I've spoken through. I might just.
Minister, I believe it has been circulated. Indeed, I have a copy. So, yes.
I thought it had been circulated. I mean, I've spoken on a number of occasions now through the purpose of this amendment, giving the Minister the flexibility in the regulation-making power to deal with the various items that are listed in the amendment, deal with payment rights, means testing arrangements, eligibility criteria, waiting periods and residency requirements to respond in a scalable, measured and timely manner. This power will cease at the end of 2020, and you'll be able to see paragraphs or clauses 5 and 6, which provide that an instrument made under this item has no operation after 31 December 2020, and that this item itself, so the power that it provides to the Minister, is repealed on 31 December 2020.
I just advise the Senate that we're dealing with the new amendment, the amended amendment Z85110, and it's got 9:06 p.m. at the bottom of the document. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President, and I thank the Leader of the Government in the Senate for responding to the concerns about the original amendment. This is an important amendment, and we acknowledge that it gives unprecedentedly broad powers to the Minister to change arrangements for a whole range of social security payments. It is unprecedented, but we think that flexibility is going to be required, and it goes to a number of the issues we've raised about gaps and potential gaps and increasing pressure for some of those people to be, one, eligible for certain payments over the next few months, but also those who might not have been included in the first and second of the stimulus packages. We did believe that this needed an expiry date because of the significant powers that are being delegated from legislation to regulation, making at the executive's own discretion. And so that has been rolled in. Essentially, this responds to concerns that Labor has been raising. They were raised directly by the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Albanese, with the Prime Minister and Treasurer directly today about concerns we had. We don't want to delay this legislation passing. We've made that clear. We want to support the government where we can. We think there are gaps. We think there are issues that are coming to everyone's electorate office, every senator's office, about people who might not be getting the help they need, and this will give the government the power and ability to respond to that without the Parliament sitting. It is unprecedented. I think giving broad powers like this would, in any normal situation, never be provided to the executive, but this is a very unusual world that we are living in now, and we acknowledge that the government will have to respond, and will have to respond at different times and in different ways over the next few months. We thank the government for working with us and listening to our very genuine suggestions that this matter needed to be dealt with, and it is outlined in the amendment. I would seek others, senators' support for this. Noting that it expires on the 31st of December, and we genuinely hope this amendment gives the government the power to do good for people who are going to be suffering significant hardship over the next few months as this crisis unfolds, and perhaps we can't even predict the position that some will be in at the moment, and that's why the Senate and the Parliament will give this power to the Minister to be used wisely, carefully, and in response to the desperation and anxiety that many in the community are feeling about their own personal circumstance and that of their families over the next few months.
Senator Siewert.
I just want to ask a few questions about the operation of this as opposed to the operation of the other provisions in the bill, which, Minister, give you, through you, Chair, give you the capacity to, after the 6 months, to roll over the stimulus package, the payments, and to also apply the payments to other payment types, the supplement to other payment types. Now, my understanding of those clauses give the Minister the capacity to do it at a 3 months interval. Is that correct? And I understand that hasn't got a sunset clause.
Minister Ruston.
Senator Siewert, the entire clause sunsets on the 30th of December, so there is no further capacity for me to be able to make regulation under this regulation past that.
Senator Siewert.
Sorry, I'm talking about the existing, not this. Sorry, I'm talking about the existing bill, and there are clauses in that. There's not a sunset clause on those particular clauses, is there?
Minister Ruston.
The provisions within the substantial legislation that make changes to the Act, as opposed to these regulations that we're talking about, are for a period of 6 months. And because they are related to provisions directly as a result of the impact of coronavirus, my capacity to extend only relates to as long and in so much as that the continuing requirement is as a result of the impact of coronavirus. I can't make any further determinations if the crisis is over.
Senator Siewert.
That's what I was trying to clarify, because that then is as long as it's determined that the crisis is in operation. Now, heaven forbid that it goes past this date, but the point I'm making is that what I'm concerned about, while I agree with the need to curtail this for the reasons that have just been articulated, or to sunset it, I'm concerned that we've just had a very positive move in terms of being told that student payments for students on youth allowance, for example, will get, through this mechanism, the supplement. My deep concern is if we are in a situation where there's a need for the other supplement payments to continue, the students then, or anybody granted the payments or payments under this provision, will then automatically drop off those payments. That is my concern. So I'm seeking some assurance that the government will then act, if we accept this sunset clause, will act to address that particular issue. And I'm looking at the worst case scenario, I know, but you have looked at the worst case scenario by enabling the minister, the government I mean, the government's looked at worst case scenario by enabling the minister to make these rolling payments in the event that the crisis isn't over.
Minister Ruston.
Okay, Senator Siewert, in relation to the primary legislation that we're dealing with today, I am required to come back to this place in order for me to go past the 6 months of the provisions that are contained within it. Is that right? Oh, 3 months at a time by instrument. Sorry, I'm just... Yes, okay, so I can come back 3 months at a time by instrument. In relation to the obviously this sunsets on the 30th of December, we would imagine that between now and the 30th of December, there would be required, this place would require to make a further determination if we decided that we needed to extend these provisions past the 30th of December 2020. As you say, it is something that it is too horrid to think about. However, this place would need to make a determination to enable me to go past the 30th of December with the provisions contained in these regulations.
Senator Siewert.
Sorry, Minister, I understand that, and I will be quiet in a minute. I do understand that. The problem is that we have to come back for this particular provision, but not the other provisions, because they're delegated instruments. So what I'm seeking is an assurance that if in the worst case scenario, that the government will, if the other payments are continuing, that the government will therefore act to make sure that students aren't then dropped off when nobody else is dropped off. And again, I'm looking at the worst case scenarios here, because you've clearly done that with the provisions that you've put in place, which is good, not a criticism. It's good, but I want to make sure that young people are also protected through the mechanisms that you're setting in place through this particular provision.
Mr. Ruston.
Thank you, Senator Siewert, and I completely understand the issue that and the point you're trying to make here, but can I absolutely assure you that the Prime Minister has been very, very clear with the Australian public, as he has with all of us here, that we as a government are absolutely committed to do what it takes to get every Australian from here to the other side, whenever and wherever that may be. If there is a circumstance where we are required to have things in place past the 30th of December 2020, we would be seeking come back to this place in whatever format that had to take place, and would seek the agreement of this place to continue the provisions that are contained in this regulation. Because of the nature of the way the regulation's written, we chose to sunset it on the 30th of December to give us the 3 months past the end of the 6 month period, which is the second period of the 3 month rolling periods that we have in the primary legislation. But can I assure you and assure this place and assure anybody that's listening, the government will be supporting Australians in every way it possibly can to get them from here to the other side of this crisis.
The question is that the motion as moved by Minister Cormann, Z8510 as amended and republished at 9:06 p.m. be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Senator Siewert.
Thank you. Can I move Greens amendments 1 to 8 on sheet 8911? These relate to, and I touched on this in my second reading contribution, this relates to the additional $750 for families that have children, because it's absolutely inevitable that families with children need extra support for those children during this time of crisis. I've articulated that during my second reading speech. I know that people want to deal with this expeditiously, so I'll leave my comments at that. But other than urging the government and the opposition to look at the impact this crisis is having on families and making sure that they are supported, as the Minister said, to get to the other side of this crisis.
Senator Siewert, are you seeking leave to actually move 1 to 8 on sheet 8911 together?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to do that. I apologise. I seek leave to move them together. I figured the Chamber would like me to do that.
Okay, leave granted. Leave is granted. Minister.
Thank you very much, Senator Siewert. As the Prime Minister has clearly outlined, the safety net provisions that were announced on Sunday were to make sure that we continue to support all Australians. Every Australian who was eligible to receive the first $750 under the stimulus will be eligible to receive the second $750 stimulus, whilst of course at the same time continuing to get access to family tax benefit that they currently are able to access.
Okay. So the question is that the request for amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against, no. The ayes have it. The noes have it. Okay, so the noes have it. Noes have it? Noes have it.
Chair, no, he's acting as the chair at the moment. Sorry, we're just having a little conversation down the back here. Can I ask that the Greens' support for those amendments be recorded?
Yes, that'll be so recorded. Senator Siewert.
Thank you. I'd now like to request leave, or by leave, to move amendments 1 to 4 on sheet 8910 together.
So leave granted. Leave's granted. Senator Siewert.
Thank you. I move those amendments. This is about giving people that are on the low-income healthcare card access to the $750 payment. And I have a question for the Minister, and that is, why were low-income healthcare card holders left off the bonus of $750, given that by the very nature of the fact that it's a low-income healthcare card, the very nature of that is that people on low incomes, why they were actually left off when seniors, people holding seniors' healthcare card were included, but those on low incomes were not?
Minister.
I made the point before. I've actually spoken to this. We will be opposing this amendment. Recipients of these payments have not traditionally been included in these types of supplement arrangements, and we're not proposing to do it now.
Senator Siewert.
You yourselves and many speakers today have articulated how this is unprecedented times. So quite frankly, I don't care if they didn't get it before. They probably should have got it before. They certainly should now get it. And quite frankly, it's unprecedented that you would double job seeker payment. Not that I'm opposing that. As you know, I'm strongly supportive of it. But for heaven's sake, these are people of low income. They should be supported. They should get access to those additional resources. If anybody needs it, it's those on low incomes.
The question is that the request for amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I believe the noes have it. Senator Siewert.
As I have been requesting, instead of calling for a division, can you please record that the Greens supported those amendments?
Okay, so ordered. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move amendments on sheet 8914. These amendments relate to support for the aviation industry and Australian Airlines during the corona crisis. We know that the government's already been in significant conversations and discussions with airlines. These amendments ensure appropriate protections for workers and taxpayers in any airline bailout. We think it is absolutely essential that if the Australian people and the taxpayer is going to participate in these types of bailouts, that they get something in return. We need to make sure that they do. We need to make sure, as these amendments insist, that they require any bailout to take place via an equity stake, rather than just handing over the cash to these big corporations. And it is just beggars' belief that we would just do this and not take the opportunity to ensure that the Australian people are indeed represented at the table. We need to make sure workers keep their jobs and that protections for their jobs are ongoing. At the very least, in this medium term, when the whole point of this type of extraordinary support from government is to ensure that the people working for these corporations actually get looked after and get to keep their jobs. Now, we've heard many times reference in this place and the other today about the extraordinary situation where, after being given significant support from the government, Qantas stood down 20,000 staff members. 20,000 in one day. And we know that the industry has effectively been grounded. We get that. But we need to make sure that if we're going to be putting up big loads of cash for these corporations, that the workers themselves are the ones that these benefits flow to. I was listening to a report in the evening following that decision by Qantas as to how numerous households around the country had just lost both incomes, because a number of families where couples living together, sharing household costs, have families, looking after household bills, are both employed by Qantas, and both on the same day lost their jobs. This is the type of protection for people like those families and others that we need to insist on if we're going to stump up this large amount of money. So what this amendment does is gives protection for workers, but also ensures that the Australian people are represented. We would like to see a requirement that board seats are put aside for the Australian taxpayer, represented by the government, and for workers. It is the very least that can happen at an extraordinary time like this, and I urge the opposition to support this amendment.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. The government is going to oppose this amendment. The Commonwealth has provided initial support to our airline industry through relief from a range of taxes and government charges, estimated to be up to $715 million. The government will consider further support for our aviation sector through an unprecedented period of disruption to international and domestic air travel. The proposed amendments would require the Commonwealth to take an equity stake in an airline as a condition for providing any future financial support. The Commonwealth will consider any further support according to the sound principles we have already set out. The proposed amendments would unnecessarily constrain the government's ability to tailor any future support according to the needs of the sector in the interests of the nation.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you. Labor won't be supporting this amendment. While we agree that further support will be needed for the aviation sector, this should be part of the next fully costed economic support package. This would ensure full understanding of the impacts on the sector and allow for consultation with companies, unions, staff and other stakeholders.
So the question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I believe the noes have it.
It's recorded that it was the Australian Greens who supported this amendment.
Yeah, so ordered. Senator Seward.
Thank you. I move Greens Amendment 1 and 2 on sheet 8904, which opposes items 34 and 35 of Schedule 4. And this relates to the fact that the government wants to put the $750 on through income management, and then so excludes the payment from that, and also excludes that same payments from the cashless debit card. In other words, it makes sure that the cashless debit card this money isn't put on the cashless debit card, because we don't think that is appropriate, and also the community, judging by the response that people have had, don't think it's a good idea.
So Senator Seward, you seek leave to move them together?
Yes, although the grey doesn't say I had to seek leave there, but I will.
Okay. Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. The government will be opposing this amendment. The coronavirus supplement should be subject to the same income management or cashless debit card arrangements as the person's base payment. This is consistent with government policy.
Okay, so the question is that items 34 and 35 of Schedule 4 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I believe the ayes have it. Senator Seward, you would like that to be recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay. Senator Seward.
Thank you. I'd now like to move Green amendments on request 1, I beg your pardon, which is sheet 8915, and this relates to enabling people on the disability support pension and the age pension. I'll say that again. On DSP, the carer payment, but also the aged pension if they receive the Commonwealth rent assistance. And this is because we think, as I again highlighted in my second reading contribution, that these group of people, we think, deserve to get the supplement, the $550 supplement, because they will be, we disagree with the government. We think there will be extra payment, there will be extra costs for these particular groups of people, because of the very nature of the fact that people with disability, disabled people, will face increased costs in accessing services, in accessing basic household goods, and also particularly in the nature of the equipment and the particular nature, because many of them are very vulnerable to this particular virus, they will need a very good protection equipment, personal protection equipment, in order to remain healthy. Those that are on carer payment will also be at increased risk. They also have increased costs. And we know that there is a lot of older Australians and people on the age pension that are living in poverty. And that group, living in poverty is very strongly dominated by those that actually don't own their own home and that are paying rent. And so that's why we think that particular group of people, who will be, let's face it, needing to be particularly careful about self-isolating because they are extremely vulnerable to coronavirus. We know that from what's happening globally. And that's why we think it's important that these particular groups of people should also get access to the supplement. Again, I know that there can be provisions, we've discussed that, so I'll just acknowledge that there are provisions in the bill to enable a minister to make the supplement available to other payments, but we want to end the uncertainty. Again, as I highlighted in my second reading contribution, we want to end the uncertainty for people to make sure that they get access to the payment as soon as possible.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Government will be opposing this amendment. This amendment is unnecessary. The legislation already allows for the Government to include additional cohorts of people on income support payments through a legislative instrument, if and when that may be required. People receiving other payments are provided income support for other reasons. At this point, the Government is focused on providing additional support for job seekers. The coronavirus supplement is designed to cushion the impact of any downturn in the economy on workers and people looking for work. People on job seeker payment and youth allowance other job seeker are on payment for the purpose of looking for work, and we understand the labour market will be facing significant challenges over coming months. In order to assist current income support recipients, people on other payments will be eligible for the first and second economic support payment, $750 each time. We have the ability under the legislation we are putting to the Parliament to make additional payments eligible for the coronavirus supplement. We will keep a close eye on economic conditions and what is occurring in Australia and make appropriate, prudent and measured decisions to respond to circumstances as they continue to evolve.
Senator McKim.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. Well, while we were discussing in here the government's response to people on temporary visas in terms of the expiry of their visas and in terms of providing income support for many people on temporary visas, and the government ministers in here were stalling away and not giving any commitments, I'll just announce on behalf of the government that they've dropped to the Australian in real time. Only moments ago they've dropped a story to the Australian, one of the government's favourite droppees at the Australian, Simon Benson, who understands, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, that the Australian government, the Morrison government, is working on, quote, a plan that includes a form of support payment for potentially hundreds of thousands of temporary migrants who stand to lose their jobs in industries such as tourism and hospitality. The headline or the lead of that story also mentions visa extensions being offered to non-residents. So it's such a shame that rather than communicating with the Senate and with his ministers in the Senate, the PM's office was off dropping the story to their favourite recipient in the Australian. Now, this is a good thing that the government is doing here, and something that we're very glad that they are doing, and that we're very glad that we've been pressuring the government to do. It is a shame that it's not in this current package. Now, because it's been dropped to the Australian rather than messaged into the Senate, we have obviously no capacity to ask detailed questions about it, because we simply have no detail about what the package is. I mean, it's almost like the Prime Minister's press secretary was listening to the debate in the Senate and went, oh, whoopsie, we left about 1.5 million people out of our coronavirus response. We'll just get onto the Australian really quickly, drop it to Simon Benson and see if we can get ourselves out of trouble. But I do want to make a very serious point here to Minister Cormann. In response to one of my previous questions on this issue, he mentioned that the government's focus was on Australians and Australian residents. Well, Minister, a lot of people are about to become effective Australian residents because they simply can't get out of the country through no fault of their own. And as Senator Keneally quite rightly pointed out, this is a public health issue as well as an issue of equity and fairness and humanity. Because no matter whether someone is ordinarily resident in Australia or ordinarily resident overseas with a temporary visa in Australia, they can still contract coronavirus just as easily as anybody else. And if you want to run a comprehensive, holistic public health response to coronavirus, you need to have a financial package supporting everybody in the country so that they can self-isolate. I can't put it any clearer than that. Your normal tricks are not going to fly here. You're in an emergency. We're all in an emergency together, and that includes people in this country on temporary visas. So, whilst the story in The Australian appears to reference only people who are on temporary visas and who have lost their jobs as a result of the shutdowns around the coronavirus response, that package, if those are the parameters of the package, it won't go far enough. Everyone who is in Australia should be regarded potentially as a resident of this country, and everybody for the purposes of the coronavirus response, and everybody in that category needs income support so they can have a house or a home in which they can self-isolate should they be required to.
So the question is that, Minister.
Let me just again confirm for Senator McKim what the position is of the government. The position of the government is that eligibility for the coronavirus supplement is based on the following income support payment categories: job seeker payment and all payments progressively transitioning to job seeker payment, those currently receiving partner allowance, widow allowance, sickness allowance and wife pension, youth allowance, job seeker, parenting payment, partnered and single, farm household allowance, a special benefit recipient. There is about another 1 million visa holders that we have added, and I've said this previously earlier today. So access to job seeker payment and youth allowance is available to people residing in Australia who are Australian citizens and permanent residents. It will not be available to people in Australia on temporary visas other than some people in limited circumstances on special category visas. Australia's social security system is a non-contributory residence-based system. It is designed to support primarily Australian citizens and permanent residents. But in relation to those on a permanent residency visa, for those who are still serving newly arrived residents' waiting periods, as I've indicated to the Chamber before, the government has decided to waive the newly arrived residents' waiting periods temporarily in order to assist permanent residents get access to job seeker payments. Generally, residency requirements will still apply, and most temporary visa holders do not qualify for job seeker payment and other forms of income support. However, special benefit is available to specified temporary visa holders, as I've also previously advised the Chamber. The classes of temporary visa holders eligible for special benefit are specified in the legislative instrument and currently include temporary partner visas, temporary humanitarian visas, and bridging visas for victims of human trafficking. The Minister for Families and Social Services has the ability to declare new visa types to be eligible for special benefit. Visa types such as temporary resident other employment and temporary resident skilled employment, which will be included by the Minister in the near future. We are not proposing to expand the eligibility for the coronavirus supplement to visa holders beyond that.
So the question is that the request for an amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I believe the noes have it. Senator Siewert, you would like
it recorded?
Yes,
please. For the benefit of the Chamber, could I also indicate that I won't be moving the Greens amendments on sheet 8906 or 8909, because we're taking the government at their word that they will be using the amendment that we passed not long ago to make sure that students, ABStudy, AusStudy, do get access to the supplement.
Okay, thank you, Senator Seward. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Chair. I seek leave to move Greens amendments 1 to 4 on sheet 8907 and amendment 1 on sheet 8908. Is it possible to move them together? Great. Thank you. So these amendments really relate to the assistance for severely affected regions, the Special Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. And amendments 1 to 4 on sheet 8907 explicitly adds local government as a potential recipient of funds. This amendment adds the inclusion of supporting communities through financial assistance to local governments and their projects as a purpose of the bill. As we know, many local government areas and their communities, especially in New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria, are still suffering from the massive impacts of the bushfires. And it will take a long time for them to recover from that alone. So the Greens want to add local government as recipients of these funds, so community projects can continue to be funded in the time of this crisis. Community projects such as maternal child health care, youth services, and support for local art and cultural activities, amongst the many other wonderful community projects that local communities and councils run. Amendment 1 on sheet 8908 inserts requirements for transparent reporting about how money is spent and an open process in allocating support funding. I understand this funding is around $1 billion, so we really do need some transparency. On that, this amendment will insert requirements to publish details of the contracts that are signed, with the full text of all agreements to be published within 2 weeks of finalizing. It will also require the publication of a quarterly list of all agreements, including the recipient, the amount, the date of the payments, and the nature of the agreement. This amendment will also require publication of a quarterly statement of the amounts expended under the bill, including the amounts paid to particular jurisdictions and type of recipients. The amendment requires that where appropriate, and that's because the Greens recognize the urgent nature of some expenditure, but where appropriate, the Minister must use an open process to allocate funds, for example, an open tender. The Minister must write every quarter to the Joint Standing Committee on Public Accounts and Audit, outlining instances in which an open tender was not used and the reason it was not in the public interest. While we understand the urgency and while we need the reason for this funding, we also think that appropriate transparency and accountability is still a valid process for any amount of funds, public funds that are expended.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. The government will be opposing this amendment. The federal government will only provide direct payments from the severely affected regions fund to states and territories, where local government are best placed to administer a program. The Commonwealth will arrange for the funds to be administered to the local government entity via the states and territories using well-established mechanisms.
So the question be that the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I believe the noes have it. Senator Faruqi, you would like the usual.
Yes, thank you.
So ordered. So the question is that the bills stand as printed. Bills be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Those again say no. I believe the ayes have it. And the question is that the bills be reported. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I believe the ayes have it.
The committee has considered the Coronavirus Economic Response Package Omnibus Bill 2020 and 7 related bills and has agreed to them with an amendment to the Coronavirus Economic Response Package Omnibus Bill 2020. Minister.
I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Question is the motion moved by Senator Cormann be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. Senator Cormann.
I move that the bill be now read a third time.
Question is the bills be read a third time. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The clerk.
Coronavirus Economic Response Package Omnibus Bill 2020, Guarantee of Lending to Small and Medium Enterprises Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020, Australian Business Growth Fund Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020, Assistance for Severely Affected Regions Special Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020, Structured Finance Support Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020, Appropriation Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill No. 1 2019-2020, Appropriation Bill Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill No. 2 2019-2020, Boosting Cash Flow for Employers Coronavirus Economic Response Package Bill 2020. We have some supply bills.
Thank you. I have received messages from the House of Representatives forwarding the following bills for concurrence. Supply Bill No. 1 2020-2021, Supply Bill No. 2 2020-21, and Supply Parliamentary Departments Bill No. 1 2020-2021. Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move that these bills may proceed without formalities and be taken together and be now read a first time.
Question is that motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The clerk.
Supply Bill No. 1 2020-2021, Supply Bill No. 2 2020-2021, Supply Bill Parliamentary Departments Bill No. 1 2020-2021.
I call the Minister first, then I'll come to you, Senator Gallagher.
I move that these bills be now read a second time, and I seek leave to have the second reading speeches incorporated in Hansard.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Labor will support the supply bills that have been introduced in the Parliament as part of the COVID-19 response. These bills will broadly provide for 7 months of funding in the 2021 financial year to allow for the continued operation of government, including the Parliament. Our support will ensure essential functions of government are able to operate through this period of uncertainty. There are some exceptions to the 7-month rule, which include full-year funding for the National Disability Insurance Agency, full-year department funding for Services Australia, the ATO and the Department of Health to ensure service delivery is maintained, and full-year appropriations for the coronavirus economic and health response measures. Supply Bill 1 will appropriate $76.4 billion, Supply Bill 2 would appropriate $6.7 billion, and the Parliamentary Department Supply Bill will appropriate $150.5 million. Like all supply and appropriation bills, these bills contain advance to the Finance Minister provisions. The advance to the Finance Minister allows the Finance Minister to authorise an amount of expenditure without the usual appropriation mechanisms for urgent and unforeseen circumstances or where there's been an error in an appropriation bill. These provisions are usually for a reasonable but modest amount. For example, in the 2019-20 appropriation bills passed in this place last year, Bill 1 had a provision of $295 million and Bill 2 had $380 million for a total of $675 million. The supply bills that are before us right now are proposing an advance to the Finance Minister provision that totals $40 billion. This is an unprecedented amount. However, given the unprecedented nature of the times we are in, we deem the provisions to be appropriate. After all, just over a week after the announcement of a $17.6 billion stimulus package, we nearly had a quadrupling of the amount with a $66 billion package that followed. We are aware of discussions around a third economic response package being considered, and I don't think anyone's in a position to understand how large that might require to be, how large that package might need to be. That's why we considered this larger provision to be appropriate. But Labor's support for this has been conditional, and as part of our agreement to these bills and the advance to the Finance Minister provisions contained in them, we have sought and received this agreement of the government for a number of transparency and oversight provisions which we deem to be quite reasonable for the situation we find ourselves in. After negotiations with the Minister for Finance, through him to the government, which I acknowledge and appreciate the spirit and engagement on this, the government will issue a media release after every use of the advance to the Finance Minister, I think on the Friday of the week that the advance was used, and seek approval from the opposition or concurrence from the opposition for a proposed use of the advance to the Finance Minister of any sum greater than $1 billion. Labor believes these transparency and oversight provisions related to the advance to the Finance Minister will enhance scrutiny of this facility, which is appropriate given the large amount of funding that we're talking about. So as I indicated, Labor will support these bills. It's important that we have the level of certainty that essential operations of government can continue while the COVID-19 situation is dealt with.
I'll go to Senator McKim, then I'll come to you, Senator Cormann. Senator McKim.
Thank you, President. I won't hold up the chamber unnecessarily. If I could just place on the record that as the Leader of the Greens, Adam Bant, has said regularly, and we have said in this chamber today, we will take a constructive role in the response to what many members have described as an unprecedented situation, and we will be supporting this legislation so that the machinery of government can continue in the event that, as is in fact has happened, the budget has been postponed, and in the event that this parliament is not able to resume under its previously agreed sitting arrangements. So we'll be supporting these bills.
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much. I probably should quit while I'm ahead, but when I've got such a consensus across the chamber, which is quite unique. But let me just place on record my great appreciation, in particular, for the way Senator Gallagher, as the Shadow Minister for Finance, has worked with me through these issues. I mean, we are living in unbelievable times. I don't think that any of us would have expected to be dealing with legislation of this nature and with an advance to the Finance Minister of this size. I mean, these bills are necessary to ensure the proper functioning of government services and the continuation of vital programs in an environment of global economic uncertainty resulting from the coronavirus pandemic. This economic uncertainty impacts the forecasts on which the federal budget depends. Consequently, we have decided to reschedule this year's federal budget to 6 October 2020, which will ensure that the 2020-21 budget can set out the path to economic recovery. However, this delay to the budget does mean that we won't be able to pass appropriation bills for 2020-21 before the end of the financial year. And of course, as a number of senators have observed, there is a high degree of uncertainty as to the timing as to when we will next be able to meet, which is why we have discussed with the opposition, and we appreciate the support of the entire chamber, including Senator McKim, for the proposal to increase the advance to the Finance Minister to $40 billion. This is designed to give us the fiscal capacity to respond to urgent and currently unforeseen requirements in a circumstance where there is uncertainty about when the Parliament is next able to meet. It ensures we have sufficient appropriations available to meet unforeseen costs, which may include responding to the need for additional, more costly medical equipment and supplies, given the high international demand and the upward pressure on prices. It also gives us the capacity to provide further support to our economy and to Australians, even as required, and to support the ongoing operations of our government, but also to, if required, make additional payments to state and territory governments to support, for example, their provision of healthcare services to Australians. In light of the significant increase in the advance to the Finance Minister, the government has agreed to the additional transparency measures that Senator Gallagher mentioned. I will issue a media release each Friday where one or more determinations have been made in that week to allocate funding from that advance. And I will also write to the Shadow Finance Minister to seek her concurrence on behalf of the opposition prior to drawing any funding from an advance to the Finance Minister for any given proposed expenditure greater than $1 billion. So with those few words, I commend these bills to the Senate.
Question is the bills be read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The clerk.
Supply Bill number 1, 2020-21. Supply Bill number 2, 2020-21. Supply Bill Parliamentary Departments Bill number 1, 2020-21.
Senator Cormann.
I move that the bills be now read a third time.
Question is the bills be read a third time. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Clerk.
Supply Bill number 1, 2020-21. Supply Bill number 2, 2020-21. Supply Bill Parliamentary Departments number 1, 2020-21.
Just a quick housekeeping matter. I have received a message from the House of Representatives informing the Senate of the appointment of Mr Conroy in place of Ms Thwaites to the Joint Committee of Public Accounts and Audit. Senator Cormann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the motion circulated in my name in relation to the next sitting of the Senate and leave of absences.
Senator McKim.
Sorry. Thank you, President. I thought a Labor member may request the call, but regardless, if I could just make a couple of observations about this and flag with you, President, that I will be asking that Part A be put separately from Parts B, C and D. So that will be a request that I'll be making of you. We don't believe it's appropriate to suspend effective until 11th of August. There are other ways around this, and we think that a suspension of effectively 6 months of the Parliament is simply not warranted and justified under the current circumstances. Now, Labor were very strong on this in the House of Representatives, and in fact opposed this policy of the government, and Labor can speak for itself in this place, but the Greens, as we did in the other place, will be voting against this provision. And we believe that the Senate timetable, as previously agreed, should be maintained, and there are mechanisms available if sittings need to be postponed. So that deals with Clause A. I also want to flag with you, President, that we will be moving amendments to Parts B and C, which insert in each part after the words Leader of the Opposition in the Senate and the Leader of the Greens in the Senate. We are the third party in this place. We are recognised as a party, that is, we have party status recognised by the Parliament, and we believe that our leader, Senator Waters, our leader in the Senate, Senator Waters, ought to be involved in any discussions or mechanisms covered in Part B or and Part C of this motion.
So, Senator McKim, what I'll do is I'll put Clause A first, then I'll ask you to move your amendments to Clause B and C, which are fairly simple. The question is that Clause A of the motion moved by Senator Cormann be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. Senator McKim.
Yes, I simply make the same request you've had made of you, and just for noting, Labor supported the government's position on this, and it was opposed by the Greens.
And so the journals and the Hansard will record the Greens opposed the vote on Clause A. I will now ask you would like your amendment, which I'm happy to take verbally, Senator McKim, which is after the words Leader of the Opposition in the Senate in Clause B and C to insert Leader of the Australian Greens in the Senate. Is that?
Thank you, President. That's exactly my amendment.
So the question is that I'll put the amendment first, that clauses B and C be amended in those terms. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The noes have it. The same request for the record. As so recorded, that the Greens supported Clause B and C. Senator Roberts?
I'd like to support that as well, please.
Senator Roberts will be so recorded as well, supporting that particular provision. So now what I will do is I will put clauses B, C and D in their original form collectively to the Senate. Those in support of those clauses say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it, so the motion is passed unamended, clauses A, B, C and D. Can I just make a very brief statement before I call you for the last motion, Senator Cormann? As we depart and focus on our families, communities, fellow citizens, and I'd say also our staff over the coming months, can I also ask us to consider one another, because this is a particularly collegial place where many senators spend a great deal of time with one another, working through some very contentious and difficult issues that don't often get public attention, but do serve the public interest. Now, that won't be happening for the foreseeable future. So as I would just ask that we all consider each other, and particularly those who are subject to testing, self-isolation or indeed recovery from this particular illness over the coming months. And I'd particularly like to thank all senators and particularly the staff of the Senate for their cooperation in achieving the results we have today. Senator Cormann.
I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Question is that the Senate do now adjourn until the 11th of August. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned until the 11th of August this year.